Bulletcast for life.
Welcome everybody to another edition of Under the Radar. My name is Brandon, and on today's episode we will be going over the latest episodes of NXT TV and Total Bellas, as well as some wrestling news. So let's just jump into that news. Not a whole lot of news going on over the weekend. Some stuff that actually happened right after the Bulletcast went off the air, as well as a thing that happened before the Bulletcast went on the air, and I forgot to mention it. So let's talk about that. A wrestling legend has announced his retirement from wrestling. Jushin Liger announced last week that his retirement date will be at Wrestle Kingdom next year on January 4th, 2020. Big news. Obviously, Jushin Liger, one of the greatest cruiserweights of all time. Innovative. You know, he's been wrestling since the 80s, I believe, like late 80s. He is 54 years old. So obviously he has been in the business. He has done everything that there possibly is to do. He's had great match after great match. Still can wrestle. I mean, for him being 54 years old, the matches that he puts on still to this day is incredible. Obviously not what he was 25, 30 years ago, but definitely still a legend in the business. Going to be sad to see him walk away, but hopefully they give him a big time match at Wrestle Kingdom. He can have, you know, a great match with whoever he wants. I don't know. I haven't really been paying attention about some speculation about who he could wrestle, but I wish we see Jushin Liger maybe even do a G1. I don't know if he's up to that or if he could do that, but, you know, seeing Jushin Liger one last go around, maybe doing a Super J Cup or a G1 for the last time would be a whole lot of fun. So shout out to Jushin Liger. Hopefully his retirement and everything lives up to the hype, and he has one last go around, kind of like what Kurt Angle is. We're going to probably talk about the retirement match for Kurt Angle at WrestleMania next year, or this year, tomorrow on the Bulletcast when that goes live. So next up we have some more departures, some rumored departures from WWE. Gallows and Anderson reportedly turned down new WWE contracts. Now, does this mean they're leaving? Not necessarily. It just means that they turned down a contract. Apparently, it is rumored to be a multi-million-dollar deal to remain with the company. Obviously, Gallows and Anderson have ties to the Young Bucks. They have ties to Japan. So, does this possibly mean they're going to AEW? Not exactly. Is it a strong possibility? Absolutely. So, I mean, Gallows and Anderson is one of those guys that we've been talking about that's been kind of underutilized. Yes, they had their little bit of a push with AJ. They've had a run with the tag team titles, but not exactly centerpiece for a tag team in WWE. So I'm kind of happy to see Gallows and Anderson jump ship probably to AEW, let's be honest. And if Gallows and Anderson does go to AEW, I mean, that tag team division just right now with the Bucks, the Lucha Bros, and now Gallows and Anderson is looking very, very good, as well as probably some of those, OVE, whatever. No, I don't know. The Chinese promotion that they have their deal with. I'm pretty sure they're going to have some tag teams in that division. So it's going to be a whole lot of fun to see Gallows and Anderson. Obviously, there's the Revival rumored out there who wanted their release, wasn't granted. Don't know when their contracts are up. So just another line of these wrestlers who seem to be underutilized. I mean, Ty Dillinger, TJP, some other guys that are wanting. Dean Ambrose, obviously, these people are starting to trickle out of the company, and it's fun when you're, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, kind of Finn Balor, but Finn Balor can obviously argue that he's been underutilized and could leave the company as well. So when it's a whole lot of fun, we're in the top tier, making a whole bunch of money, getting exposure, but even then, you're not used to your full potential because, as we've been saying on the Bulletcast, like this creative direction, even my my views on Fastlane was pretty bad creatively. Luckily, in the ring was very good, especially the last half of the show. So that saved the show from being a complete train wreck. But creatively, what WWE has been doing with the whole Vince McMahon just kind of almost being bipolar, like not trying to make light of it, but just with what he's been doing with Kofi, it just doesn't really make any sense, which I guess that's the whole reason. It's not supposed to make sense. You're just supposed to be mad at Vince. I don't know. So Gallows and Anderson, I would probably put them going to AEW number 1 and then going back to Japan number 2. I just think, Anderson obviously has big ties to Japan. He's been there for a long time, but I think now, Anderson and Gallows both have kids. They have a family. I would think that they want to stay in the States, work less dates, not having to go travel overseas, once a month at least. So, another interesting move for possibly AEW and WWE. Don't know exactly when their contract runs out, but so apparently Big Dave said that their contract ends in late September. So obviously nothing too major right now. But after SummerSlam happens, that's when the heat gets turned on to see if they do sign a new contract. So not finally, but next up, we have the NXT TV report, and this was a very big episode of NXT TV, the complete first round of the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. Every single match was on the show. The show itself was about an hour and 15 minutes. It was not only Dusty Rhodes Classic, there was a angle in there as well. So they started off having a silent tribute with the graphic of King Kong Bundy, so I thought that was nice. They do a pre-package of the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic with past winners, past moments, some little splices of Dusty Rhodes promos in there. So no real mention of Tommaso Ciampa being injured on this show. Obviously, they're going to address that probably at the next set of TV tapings when it actually happened. So we've talked about it we talked about it in the Bulletcast last week. Obviously, they were looking to go towards Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano at New York's Takeover. We're going to get into what happened on this show, but no mention of the Tommaso Ciampa neck injury on this show. So, the first match we have is Ricochet and Aleister Black going up against the European Union, which is Fabian Eichner and Marcel Bartel. And this match sees Ricochet and Aleister Black winning in 8 minutes and 40 seconds. Not a surprise that Ricochet and Black won, obviously the bigger stars out of the four men in this match, but I thought it was a hell of a match to start off the show. Kind of a little bit of a foregone conclusion, as I said, that Ricochet and Black were going to win, but I thought there was a good near fall in there that believably you could have seen the European Union walking away with it. But hot match, a lot of spots in here. The crowd chanted "Mamma Mia" and blah blah blah, or that was that. I don't even know. That might have been Mauro, because sometimes the crowd chants "Mamma Mia." But anyways, a very good match to start it off, but it only gets better from here. So next up, they have a recap of Donovan Dijakovic and Keith Lee going to the double countout last week. Keith Lee and Danny Burch are training in the Performance Center, and then Dijakovic comes in, knocks some rookies over, and then challenges Lee to another match. The match is booked for 2 weeks from now, so next week it will happen in terms of when the show happens. Next up, we have Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch going up against the Forgotten Sons. And the Forgotten Sons get the victory in another 8+ minute match. This one clocking in at 8 minutes and 23 seconds. Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch, easy for me to say, are fan favorites. They're kind of a little cult hero. They just came back after an injury. And Forgotten Sons win this one. A little bit of a downer, to be honest. I mean, the crowd is definitely behind Lorcan and Burch, but the Forgotten Sons are definitely, I don't see anything in them. I just keep saying this every single week. They don't really seem to entice me promo-wise, in the ring-wise. But looking at it from a distance, it does make sense. Like, they're kind of the only true heels in this tournament, to where people like legitimately don't like them. So I guess it makes sense for them to just keep moving on in the tournament, since they're going to be up against other babyface teams. So, if Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch were to move on, I believe they were going to face Ricochet and Black, so then that would be kind of another babyface matchup. That would be kind of hard for the crowd to decide who they want to win. So, I mean, obviously, we've been seeing the Forgotten Sons getting a push recently. I still don't see anything in them, but I think it's just one of those things where NXT was just, they have more things to do for the Forgotten Sons. Maybe this is kind of their test. This is kind of like their last go-around. They get a push in this thing. If they don't show anything, maybe they're done for, maybe they're not. Or maybe it's just as simple as they're a heel team. Let them go deep in the tournament so we can have an adversary for maybe maybe they make it to the finals. I wouldn't advise them going to the final, because I just think that would just hurt the match so much, especially, well, obviously they didn't know this at the time, but now with Gargano and Ciampa not happening with Ciampa having his neck injury. That might hurt the overall, in-ring ness. I don't even know what I was trying to say. The in-ring aspect of the takeover might hurt because of Gargano or Ciampa not being there. So if the Forgotten Sons are in that finals match, not saying they can't have a good match. I mean, obviously, if Blake is in there, Blake has had good matches in his tag team career. But I don't I don't exactly know. But I mean, you never know. Maybe they're just holding some things back, and then once they get farther on in the tournament, they're going to make it and just get one for the Gipper. I don't know. So next up, we have the lone non-Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic angle inside the Full Sail Arena. Velveteen Dream comes out to his music. He does not go to the ring. He goes over to the right side of the stage and stands on top of the announce desk. And the crowd is chanting for him. They're chanting speech. And Velveteen Dream says no speech. That he just wanted to remind the crowd that he is the new NXT North American champion. The crowd was going nuts for him. And he had another reminder, but then we heard bro. And then Matt Riddle came out, and Matt Riddle said hi. He just said he wanted to say hi and congratulate the Dream on his new NXT North American Championship. And then Riddle says he wants a closer look at that championship. And Dream waves it around. Riddle said that now he can't help but imagine what it would look like if that belt was around his waist, bro. Riddle nodded with the crowd, and then Dream says Riddle must be on cloud 9 because the Dream is not your bro. And then he snaps his finger, and then the spotlight shines down on Dream, and he says the spotlight belongs to me, and Dream poses. And that was the end of this segment. I mean, pretty short, sweet, but that's really all you need with these two guys. Just basically put them together and just say, look, we're going to have Matt Riddle against Velveteen Dream. Go crazy, fans. That's basically what they did here. I mean, they had a little bit of a, back and forth, but you don't need to do a whole lot to sell people on this match. I'm already sold on this match. Matt Riddle versus Velveteen Dream. Once again, a kind of common theme with NXT is it's going to be hard to see who's a face and who's a heel in this. I think Velveteen Dream is almost kind of like Bianca Belair. He can go back and forth between heel and face. I think he's just so over as a face now that they're just not going to fight the headwind. I think Velveteen Dream might have heel tendencies, but I think when he comes out to the ring in New York, he's going to be super over, and it's going to be an electric atmosphere, and this match could be fantastic. I mean, obviously the biggest match of Matt Riddle's WWE career. Velveteen Dream probably his first championship defense, so he's going to be motivated. This is going to be one hell of a match, so I'm definitely excited for this. It definitely helps out that, as I said, maybe with the Forgotten Sons possibly making it to the finals of the Dusty Rhodes Classic, this might be the best match of the show at TakeOver. So then they go to a package of Io Shirai. She talks about Bianca Belair, how Io was the one who has beaten the NXT Women's Champion Shayna Baszler, and Belair has not done that. So it was Kairi Sane and Io Shirai kind of sitting next to each other, and then Kairi was saying that she believes in Io, and then Shirai starts cutting a promo on Belair in Japanese. You don't need to speak Japanese. You don't need to speak the language to know what I said. There is a number one contenders match between Belair and Shirai, going to be facing off next week, which is tomorrow on Wednesday if you are listening to this on Tuesday or whenever. So next match, we have the Street Profits taking on Mustache Mountain, and another good match between these guys here. Mustache Mountain ends up getting the victory in 7 minutes and 23 seconds. A really fun match here. Street Profits obviously kind of came out with a little more intensity after their match a couple weeks ago. So this can also kind of build up their foreseeable heel turn. They're playing to the crowd. They're having fun. Yes, they show a little bit of aggression inside the ring, but then they keep losing. So maybe now this kind of flips the switch for them to be aggressive all the time, not have fun with the crowd. Realize look, we're trying to have fun and we're trying to do all this stuff, but that just doesn't culminate to wins inside the ring. So now they're going to be they're still going to be the Street Profits. They're still going to probably be like kind of the same act, but they're not going to pander to the crowd. They're just going to go out there, get their business done, and do that. So obviously the Street Profits were kind of more of a tweener in this role. I think Mustache Mountain definitely over the crowd. They win. Definitely not the best match in the world. I mean, the Street Profits still, I don't know if I'd say green. I probably would just say clunky. I mean, they've been on the NXT roster enough that you would expect them to maybe be a little bit better wrestlers, but they just haven't exactly shown. Kind of like the Forgotten Sons, like they've been there for a long time, and yet I haven't really seen a whole bunch of in-ring improvement for them. I mean, on the mic, their characters, they're fantastic, but in the ring, they're still a little sloppy, but they're not like the Velveteen Dream, and even Velveteen Dream is a great wrestler in the ring. So sometimes your charisma and your act around everything else can make up for the lack of in-ring ability. But when you're in a match with Mustache Mountain, two of, the best tag teams in NXT, or in WWE or in wrestling period, and the match is a little clunky, I'm more apt to blame Street Profits than Mustache Mountain. So we have the main event and the final match of the night. We have Undisputed Era against DIY, Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. So Undisputed Era comes out first, and Gargano comes out first, and then Ciampa comes out. They come out to separate music. They come out separately. But then Ciampa stops, and Ciampa and Gargano kind of look at each other. And then the DIY music hits. They put it up on the Titantron. The crowd goes nuts. And we have the match. So, I was looking at this match kind of more. I mean, obviously it was a great match, but I was kind of looking kind of between the lines and seeing if I can see anything from Ciampa to see if he was kind of favoring his neck, if anything was going on. And for the most part, it looked as though they were, he was kind of maybe holding back a little bit, but that also just could have been the match structure. Obviously, when they're in DIY, Gargano would get a lot of the heat put on him, hot tag to Ciampa, cut him off, and then maybe Gargano makes the hot tag at the very end. So Ciampa maybe doesn't do as much as Johnny Gargano in the match, but that was usually what would happen in the DIY matches regardless. So DIY ends up getting the victory in 14 minutes. Ciampa hits the spike DDT, Gargano hits a springboard DDT, and O'Reilly managed to kick out. And then DIY hit their finisher for the victory. So obviously, a fantastic match between these four competitors. And as I said, I couldn't exactly tell Ciampa, doing a whole lot in terms of I was kind of counting the bumps he was taking. He was kind of taking it slow at the beginning, but then he started ramping it up at the very end. So nothing too major. So, this neck injury is definitely just kind of a wear and tear injury where it's not going to, happen on one bad bump. It's going to be something that happens over time. And no scene of dissension between DIY, just pretty straightforward. Undisputed Era are kind of pseudo baby faces. I would say this Undisputed Era tag team was Red Dragon. It was Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly. No Adam Cole or Roderick Strong at ringside. So just a straight up 2-on-2 match, and DIY was kind of the pseudo baby faces here. Obviously, Undisputed Era are beloved by the crowd, but they can turn it up a little bit, get some boos. DIY obviously being back together for the first time, so they're going to be a little bit more fan favorites than Undisputed Era just because of the novelty factor. So overall, fantastic match, fantastic show overall. I was a little surprised that they just had straight up 4 matches, a couple segments here and there, but they had all the Dusty Rhodes matches in 1 week. A little bit over an hour, which is always kind of nice to see, especially when they have the network. They have a little more flexibility, so they can do shows like this where they have a lot of wrestling on a show, and if it goes past an hour, they don't need to sweat it, they don't need to cut it for time, they can just throw it out there in its entirety. And so, a really good match, or a really good show of NXT. Definitely would recommend seeing this 4 outstanding matches in their own special way. Obviously, the Street Profits match was a little clunky. The Forgotten Sons match was not the best, but they had the baby faces to go up against the kind of weaker heels or tweeners in the Street Profits case. So overall, just all the matches were good. At the very end, I will add the War Raiders came out with their titles and they stared down DIY. So I mean, nothing real fancy there. So I mean, that Riddle Velveteen Dream angle. I mean, it was nothing. It was nothing. Revolutionary. They were just kind of they said a few sentences back and forth, but it was just kind of like those big moments where it's like these two guys have never faced off before, but you would love to see them face off. Finally did, and it's just like, ooh, I'm so ready for NXT Takeover already to see that Riddle and Velveteen Dream feud. So obviously next week or this week, whichever however, I don't want to confuse everybody. So on this week's episode of NXT, they're going to have the semifinals of the Dusty Rhodes Classic. So next up, we have the latest episode of Total Bellas, and that was on Sunday. Just watched it yesterday while I was waiting for the Bachelor finale to kind of fill up on the DVR, because I'm not trying to watch commercials, you know what I'm saying? So sometimes you watch some stuff while another thing is going on. And I was watching Total Bellas yesterday after Raw. And on this episode, we realized that Brie Bella is kind of wishy-washy, and she has some not family problems, but commitment issues when it comes to a house. The kind of main Brie Bella storyline was that Brie. So right now, Brie and Brian and Birdie all live in San Diego, but Brie's brother and sister-in-law live in Phoenix, where they have two girls. So Birdie, really likes the older one. Obviously, the younger one is like a newborn, so she doesn't really interact with her all that much. But Brie wants to have, kind of wants to go back to her hometown in Phoenix and kind of have not start a family, obviously, but kind of put their roots down and just stay in Phoenix and not move, because they've kind of moved all over the place. They originally lived in Phoenix. Then, when Cena and Nikki Bella were together, they wanted them to move, so they moved over to San Diego. They lived in John Cena's house for guest house a little bit in Orlando. They bought a house in Washington. They lived there for like a couple months, and then they moved back down to San Diego because Nikki had her breakup and all that other stuff. So they've kind of been moving all over the place, not in terms of like locations, like different cities, but they've just kind of been on the kind of that West Coast swing for the most part, except for that one summer they lived over in Orlando. So, Brie and Brian were kind of going back and forth on exactly what they wanted to do, and Brie's revolutionary thought that she finally came up with was that, when I was a kid, I was moving all the time, so maybe that's why I don't have a commitment to a house, and I'm always moving all over the place. But Brian was the kind of person who always lived in that one house up in Washington, and they went to Phoenix at the very end of the episode. They saw this house, and it seemed like they fell in love with it. I don't exactly know if they bought it or not. The lease on their San Diego house ends in 7 months. They're debating if they want to break it, so they have to pay a lot of money for that, or if they're just going to write it out and then go to Phoenix. So that has not been concluded yet. But also on this show, they are leading up to Evolution, and they have the whole Ronda Rousey, Nikki Bella storyline kind of weaved throughout. And the whole thing with Nikki is that she's been training a lot, and she's been kind of putting training for Evolution before her family. They were doing a go-karting thing where, indoor go-karting, where kind of the kids, Brie, Brian, the brother, and the mom, and Johnny Laurinaitis were at this go-kart place, and Nikki was supposed to be there, but instead of going to the go-karting place, which was at like 10:30 in the morning, she decided to get like a double workout session in. So she no-showed that, and that was, we have to have the obligatory Brie versus Nikki feud, and that was kind of it, of Nikki putting Evolution before the family. So there you go. And Nikki is also deemed a perfectionist from her mom, and Nikki is kind of running herself rampant, and she's doing way too much at one time, and she was kind of really tired, and Mama Bella had to talk her down. Like, Nikki, you just need to sometimes calm down, and maybe you can do less things because you're a perfectionist. You can't be doing all these things at one time because you're going to tire yourself out, and of course, Mama's always right. And they kind of spliced in some Raw segments with Ronda and the Bella twins. One thing that I thought that was kind of interesting, that was like really meant nothing, was the whole line where Ronda Rousey said that the only door that Nikki Bella knocked down was the door to John's bedroom, which obviously in the promo she said John Cena's bedroom, but I think the entire time on like the whole Total Bellas, Total Divas universe, you might say, he was always kind of referred to as John. He was never like John Cena. I mean, that's kind of how it is for everybody. They always just kind of refer to themselves by their first names. Obviously, they have like their full name in the lower thirds, but I just thought that was weird that like she said John Cena, but they they obviously cut out the Cena part and just left and had Ronda say John. So I don't know why they did that. I don't know if it's like a political thing or it's just I don't know why they would do that. So that was pretty much it. But at the very end of the show, everybody was out at the beach in San Diego, and Brie gathered the family up and had a big announcement saying that after Evolution, she is going to retire from wrestling for good, and they are going to be moving to Phoenix, to where they're going to try to have another baby. So obviously Nikki was not happy about this, because not only is her sister moving away from her because she lives in San Diego, now her business partner, her wrestling tag team partner, is not going to be with her anymore. So now this is going to be the obligatory Brie versus Nikki feud going forward for the next episode or two. So stay tuned for that, because I'm going to be covering it. And that will do it for us for today. A little shorter of an episode, but not a whole lot of wrestling news to cover. Fantastic episode of NXT, and of course, a brilliant episode of Total Bellas. So thank you all very much. If you haven't listened to the last episode of the Bulletcast, I highly suggest you do that now, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be disappeared, because the next episode of the Bulletcast will be on Wednesday. So maybe you listen to this one and then go listen to the Bulletcast right after. Maybe listen to the Bulletcast and now you're listening to the Under the Radar right now. So who exactly knows? I'm not one to say what order of podcasts you should be listening in. But until next week with more NXT and Total Bellas, and who knows what kind of news is going to happen over the next week. My name's Brandon. I don't even know why I said that. I never do that in the outro, but I always do this. Goodbye and good night. Bet.